Today I'd like to tell you about the story of Chris Benoit. Chris was a big name in the world of wrestling from the late 80s to the early 2000s. The thing about any type of celebrity is that we become so familiar with the person that we feel like we know them. So it makes it even more shocking when you come to find out that the person you feel like you know and love is capable of something truly awful. And the ending to Chris's story is not only shocking, but it's so tragic. Our story starts on May 21st, 1967 in Montreal, Quebec, where Chris was born. Chris's childhood was normal. Growing up in Edmonton, pretty early on, he developed a love of wrestling. There were two wrestlers in particular that he began to idolize: a British wrestler named Tom Dynamite Kid Billington, and a Canadian-American second-generation wrestler named Bret the Hitman Hart. At 12 years old, Chris attended a local wrestling event where he watched those two performers and noticed how they stood out above everybody else. Now, he began to train to become a professional wrestler himself. He went on to the Hart Family Dungeon, which was a gym and a wrestling school located in the basement of the Hart Mansion. Now, Chris Benoit began wrestling professionally in 1985. From 1985 to 2007, Chris wrestled professionally, moving around from where he started in Canada to joining World Championship Wrestling, and then moved between the WCW and the WWF and WWE for the remainder of his career. So also in that time, Chris went on to marry twice. His first marriage produced 2 kids, but by 1997, the marriage had fizzled, and Chris began dating a woman named Nancy Sullivan. Nancy was known in the world of wrestling for being a professional wrestling manager and for her time in the ring as Woman. She was also known for being married to Chris Benoit's rival, Kevin Sullivan. Both Chris and Nancy were in their first marriages, but when in late 1996, Kevin Sullivan conceived a storyline angle in the World Championship Wrestling where Nancy, who was under her ring name Woman, was his manager, and she would leave him for Chris. Kevin insisted that the two should travel together, share hotel rooms, and hold hands in public so the affair would look real, but the storyline he had created became reality. Nancy ultimately married Chris in November 2000, and as a result, and unsurprisingly, Kevin and Chris had a very contentious relationship behind the scenes when working as they continued to compete in wrestling matches. Now, before Nancy and Chris were married, they welcomed a son, Daniel Christopher Benoit. Both the birth of their son and their wedding happened in 2000. Now, unfortunately, it wasn't wedded bliss. While they lived in Atlanta, where Nancy managed Chris's career, their marriage also became a bit contentious, and in the May of 2003, Nancy filed a restraining order and for divorce, claiming cruel treatment. But in August of that year, she decided to drop both the suit and the restraining order, and they continued to be married until June of 2007. Now, I don't know if you know this, and it might not be as common in current days, but professional athletes, and in particular wrestlers, sometimes take steroids. This might be for performance enhancement, some might take it for health reasons, but most commonly, it's known to bulk you up. So wrestlers are often the ones taking it. But the thing about steroids is they can have really bad side effects, and at the time of the incident, Chris had a very high testosterone level for a deficiency, possibly caused by previous steroid abuse. Now, prior to the incident, Chris had illegally been given medications that were not in compliance with WWE's Talent Wellness Program. In February of 2006, WWE held an investigation and found that what he had been given was nandrolone and a synthetic testosterone and an anastrozole, which is a breast cancer medication, and is only prescribed to men to reduce the production of estrogen. So it's commonly used by bodybuilders. But Chris wasn't the only one doing this. During the investigation into steroid abuse, it was revealed that there were other wrestlers who had been given the steroids. Now, I don't know if you know this, but in a wrestling match, these people are getting knocked around quite a bit, and they're probably prone to concussions and other bodily harm. Chris never sought medical attention after a match, which, why? Anything he had suffered from, he did it alone. And it's hard to say exactly what caused what happened next, but it's also hard not to think that there might be a connection between a brain that's handled just one too many concussions combined with the possible overuse of steroids. Now, and lastly, leading up to June of 2007, Chris suffered a few great losses which contributed to his poor mental state. In 2005, a wrestler by the name of Eddie Guerrero, who was Chris's closest friend, passed away suddenly from heart failure. He was only 38 years old. The passing of Eddie was so hard on Chris that those closest to him said that he had never recovered from the loss. On June 19th, 2007, Chris wrestled his final match, defeating Elijah Burke in a match to determine who would compete for the vacated ECW World Championship at Vengeance pay-per-view. That was happening on the 24th. However, Benoit missed the weekend house shows, telling WWE officials that his wife and son were vomiting blood due to food poisoning. When he failed to show up for the pay-per-view event, viewers were informed that he was unable to compete due to a family emergency and he was replaced. Even though Chris wasn't there, the crowd spent the majority of the match chanting for Benoit anyway. So, where was Chris? After he had missed the house matches, Chris was scheduled to fly out to the event Sunday morning and to be picked up by his friend Chavo Guerrero, Eddie Guerrero's nephew. Chris sent a cryptic text message to Chavo just after 3 a.m. Sunday saying, "The dogs are in the enclosed pool area and the back door is open," followed by another text detailing his address. Now, Chavo didn't think too much of it at the time, but Chris was a no-show at the airport and a no-show at the event, and he was scheduled to be at. On the Monday after, Chavo decided to show the text Chris had sent to the head of talent relations, John Laurinaitis. WWE had reached out to Chris to see what was going on, but there was no answer when they called. WWE then checked local hospitals to see if something had happened and if he had ended up there. Then Chris's agent called the police to do a welfare check. When the police arrived at Chris and Nancy's house, a neighbor suggested that she should go in first, due to the fact that she could handle the German Shepherd since the dogs knew her, because she would watch them when Chris would ever go out of town. The neighbor Holly walked inside, and within minutes, she came running back out. She had discovered Daniel Christopher Benoit's lifeless body. He was only 7 years old. Police went inside where they would find the body of Nancy as well as Chris. Nancy was found in the upstairs bathroom. Her body had been wrapped in a towel and with a Bible beside her. Daniel was found in the bedroom. He wasn't bound by anything, but there was a Bible placed beside him as well. And downstairs in the home gym was Chris Benoit's body hanging from his lap pull-down exercise machine. Over a 3-day period from June 22nd to June 24th, 2007, Chris Benoit murdered his wife Nancy and their 7-year-old son Daniel before hanging himself. Autopsy results showed that Benoit's wife was murdered first, as she was bound at the feet and wrists and died of asphyxiation, specifically strangling, on the night of June 22nd. Daniel, who also died of asphyxia but was suffocated, had taken Xanax and was killed as he was lying sedated in his bed on the morning of June 23rd. Then on the evening of June 24th, Benoit killed himself in his weight room. Toxicology reports suggested that Nancy had a therapeutic amount of hydrocodone and Xanax, but the levels weren't determined to be high enough to suggest that she had been sedated. However, the Xanax found in Daniel's body suggested that he was sedated enough that he was asleep when he was being suffocated. And Chris was found to have had Xanax, hydrocodone, and an elevated amount of testosterone caused by a synthetic form of the hormone in his system. A suicide note wasn't found until much later after the initial investigation. In a Bible of Chris's that had been sent to his first wife, Martina Benoit, and their 2 children in Canada after the incident, the handwritten note said, "I'm preparing to leave this earth." No motive has been found. However, it is speculated that Chris had sustained so many head injuries during his lifetime that when tests were done, they showed that his brain was so severely damaged, it resembled the brain of an 85-year-old Alzheimer's patient. I mean, I guess that's what happens when one of your signature moves is a diving headbutt. Repeated concussions can lead to dementia or CTE, which can then contribute to severe behavioral problems. Though the WWE released a statement saying that this theory was only speculation, but we're finding out more and more about the long-term effects of athletes such as wrestlers and football players that sustain more trauma to the head, neck, and spine. Once it was determined that Chris had committed these horrific crimes, the WWE distanced themselves from Chris and the wrestling legacy that he had built. Only recently have they started to add some of his matches to streaming sites. And that's the story of Chris Benoit, his wife Nancy, and their son Daniel. It doesn't feel like I found any closure as to why and how he could have done such a thing. Let me know in the comments what you think. Did you grow up watching Chris Benoit? Do you think that this incident happened because of mental health issues, or terrible trauma to the head, or steroid use, or a connection of all of them? I don't know. We want to hear your theories. What do you think? I'm Mack. Thanks for watching Killer Bites. We'll see you next time.